Welcome to the Murfreesboro City Council regular meeting. It's April the 18th, 7 p.m., well, a little after 7. We've had budget hearing before this, so we are already stretched and ready to go. If you will, bow your head. I'm going to lead us in our prayer and our pledge. Father, thank you for this chance that we get to be here today, for the many people who work in this city, the many people who protect us in this city. Lord, I thank you for the people that you've put in our paths, the people that you've brought here that help continue make this a great place to live, for what you're doing for us, for the blessings that you give us, for the guidance that you give us and the guidance that you're going to give us. We thank you for what you're doing, and we thank you for what you're going to do. We love you and we praise you. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we've got several ceremonial items. We're going to start with Pam. We'll start with our Stars Award.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. As you know, the Stars Award stands for Succeeding Through Attitudes Reflecting Service Excellence. This evening, we are recognizing Police Officer Matthew Rice as the Stars Award recipient for March 2019. On 2 separate days, Officer Rice apprehended or assisted in the apprehension of felony suspects involved in numerous home and auto burglaries and violent offenses. Officer Rice single-handedly located and stopped 4 suspects in a robbery only minutes after the crime was reported. The next day, Officer Rice was the driving force in the apprehension of a burglary suspect who was without a doubt responsible for many auto burglaries within Murfreesboro. The persistent efforts of Officer Rice paid off. Lieutenant Tom Sissom nominated Officer Rice for the steady and consistent effort he puts forth while doing his job. Congratulations, Officer Rice, for embodying the service.
I want to say, we had a neighborhood meeting in Northwoods a month or so ago, and I know the chief, several of our officers, where we were having some burglary issues, and I know this is part of it. So, Officer Rice, thank you. Chief, thank you for what you're doing. I know the residents in those areas are very thankful, so thank you for what you're doing. All right. We have a couple of proclamations tonight. I want to present the Fair Housing Month. Y'all come up. Whereas April 2019 marks the 51st anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act, Title 8 of the Civil Rights Act of 1968 as amended, which enunciates a national policy of fair housing with regard to race, color, religion, sex, familial status, handicap, and national origin, encourages fair housing opportunities for all. And whereas the Middle Tennessee Association of Realtors is committed to highlight the Fair Housing Act by continuing to address discrimination in our communities, to support programs that will educate the public about the right to equal housing opportunities, and to plan partnership efforts with other organizations to help assure everyone of their right to fair housing. And whereas the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics commits all realtors to provide equal professional services without discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, familial status, handicap, sexual orientation, gender identity, and national origin. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Shane McFarland, Mayor of the City of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2019 is Fair Housing Month. All right, last but not least, PD, have you got some, are you representing the linemen tonight? All right.
They're resting because they may have to go out tonight.
They're busy keeping the lights on.
They're getting their rest time in.
Today, we want to proclaim that it's National Lineman Appreciation Day. Whereas recognizing linemen, the profession of a lineman, the contributions of these brave men and women who protect public safety, and expressing support for the designation of National Lineman Appreciation Day. And whereas the profession of lineman is steeped in personal, family, and professional tradition. Whereas linemen are often first responders during storms and other catastrophic events, working to make the scene safe for the other public safety heroes. And whereas linemen work with thousands of volts of electricity, high-top power lines, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, to keep electricity flowing. And whereas linemen must often work under dangerous conditions far from their families to construct and maintain the energy infrastructure of the United States. And whereas linemen put their lives on the line every day with little recognition from the community regarding the danger of their work. Now therefore, I, Shane McFarland, Mayor of the City of Murfreesboro, Tennessee, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim April 18th, 2019 as National Lineman Appreciation Day. I know, we forget a lot of times that I was reminded this when we had a fire in our neighborhood, that as the firefighters were fighting the fire, all of a sudden a Murfreesboro Electric truck pulls up, and they run over and they pull the meter on the house to make sure that none of the firefighters who are spraying water, they've got the meter cut off. So they're just as much of a first responder as our police and fire, and we want to say thank you for what y'all do. All right, the last thing we want to proclaim today, Rick LaLance Day. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
All right. I know I'm not going to, y'all have to play along. We're not going to bring this up until Chief Folks is in the room, but I see that Chief Bowen's back there smiling. We had our Guns and Hoses basketball game was it last Saturday? Saturday before, yeah. And the police department won for the first time ever. They won the game, and they really won resoundingly. And
They cheated?
No, they didn't cheat. They just they had 50. Well, I don't know. If you ask Tim Quarters, he'd probably tell you it was a reffing because I was one of the referees. So, but we just need to make sure that when we see Chief Folks, y'all don't mention that we talked about this, but maybe y'all should ask him. Hey, how'd that game go? The police department had 20 players roughly, and the fire department had 7 players. So, and one of those was Chief Folks, so that's really 6.5 players. So, anyway, congratulations on that.
Yep.
All right, we have a consent agenda in front of you.
I'll move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move into old business. We have ordinance 19005, amended budget, second and final reading.
Mayor, before you pass this ordinance on second reading, we do have an amendment to the exhibit. We have added an amendment that is fund balance neutral for the Capital Improvement Fund. We received some county shared revenue from when they issue bonds for their schools for us to use in our schools. We actually received that last fall, but we're now ready to start spending it. So we need to make an amendment to add the revenue and add a like amount for the expense.
Okay.
So I would request that you make the amendment and then move to approve it as amended.
Can I get a motion to approve the amendment?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Can I get a motion as amended?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Continue with old business, ordinance 190Z03, zoning for approximately 19.94 acres located along Veterans Parkway, second and final reading.
Second.
Before we vote on this is the one that we had the other day that was a long discussion, I believe, on connectivity. I went out 3 separate times last week because I wanted to see on Sunday during church, and I went out in the morning and the afternoon. And I will say, I just don't see anyone cutting through a subdivision to be able, you can see the red light from there. So I do think.
All right. I'm in.
All right.
Move for approval. We already have that?
Yeah,
We already voted?
My God. Let's go. All those Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
I'm going home.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Yep.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Abstain.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Ordinance 19-004, amending the Weston Village PUD, second and final reading.
Move for approval. Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We have Planning Commission recommendations to schedule public hearing.
Good evening. The Planning Commission recently reviewed a rezoning request for a 3.5-acre property on West Northfield Boulevard and voted to send the review with a favorable recommendation. We would request that the council schedule a public hearing for that item on May 16th.
Can I get a motion for public hearing on May 16th?
Second.
Ms. Wright, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm going to make you go quick, Ms. Wright.
I can call it quick.
No. I'm just afraid you're going to call me Mayor Bragg.
I haven't done that in a long time.
No, but I did have someone call me Mayor Reeves this week
Oh, wow.
Old school.
from the Building and Codes Department.
It was.
So, all right, we've got the land use matters. Item number 27 has been removed from our agenda. We have the Salem Elementary data cabling. This is a change order. Who's handling this? Dr. Gilbert.
Okay, so we're going to pretend that I know what this means, but I do have someone that does know what this means. But this is about, obviously, getting data cabling to the new school.
There's no questions. I move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gilbert. Now we'll look at fiscal year 20 water and sewer rate recommendation. Mr. Gore. I was about to call you Dr. Gore.
Mayor,
Before we go
Council.
to that, Dr. Gilbert, can you stand up, please? Dr. Gilbert was awarded the Athena recipient last week.
Congratulations, Dr. Gilbert. Dr. Gilbert, since you won the Athena, people who are watching this we've been talking about the budget, but if you see an extra $14 to $16 million laying around anywhere, we sure could appreciate it. All right, thank you. Mr. Gore.
Mayor, City Council, thank you for the opportunity to come before you tonight. I do have just a few slides to kind of explain and I've got this, something on that screen there. Somebody's going to have to show me how to clear this off. It's going to drive me crazy. So I've just got a few slides to kind of go through and describe, show graphically what our pro forma looks like. Low corner. Well, I did that. So this represents right here, the orange is what we call our cost of service, the rate revenue requirements for our cost of service. You can see we've been doing a cost of service study since 2007. We under-recovered in those 2007, 2011. We've been over-recovering in the last, since 2013. So this fiscal year, 2018, we over-recovered roughly $2.9 million or 7.5%. As we look forward to our expenses in the future, we do show that we have about $2 million or $1.9 million in added expenses, but in FY22, we have a substantial drop in our debt service. So what that equals is at our current rate revenue that we're bringing in, we would be about $5.4 million over recovery for FY22. That's very strong. It's about 15%. It's a very strong position that we're in with our current rate design. We also ran a pro forma with a $35 million incurred debt. We still have the over recovery we see in FY18, same expenses over those 4 years, but we just see a $2.3 million drop in debt because we're dropping that, but we're adding back in the $35 million. So, but that still does put us at a $3.3 million in over recovery, about 8.5% if we do go get that $35 million in debt service. So this is just our affordability graph. Our current rate design shows that our average water and sewer monthly usage and cost is about $65.50. The purple dots represent an affordability index, which is for a one-person through a five-person household and their average usage. So those purple dots represents 4% annual earnings of a very low income earner, which is 50% of the average median income per HUD numbers. So we do meet our affordability metrics. With all that being said, we do not recommend, or we recommend the council not increase the water and sewer rates for FY20. I don't know if that needs to be in a form of a
It sounds like a really good thing. I move for approval.
Second.
Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, now we have water resource policies and procedures and general design requirements revisions.
Yes, this was presented to you more thoroughly at the February workshop, but you did give us some homework that you wanted us to go find some the different forms of surety that development has around the city. So we broke that down between water and sewer, road and drainage, and landscaping. The question at hand was really, do we want to accept forms of surety in the form of bonds or performance bonds? We did, as we looked at the total number of projects and the total amounts, there is it's actually about 54% of the surety currently held by the city is in the form of bonds. So we felt like removing the ability to provide the surety in that form would be a little bit of a burden to the development community. So what we did do is we came up with somewhat of a compromise on that. Due to the difficulty in sometimes retrieving those funds from a bonding company, what we've shown now is if you do receive letters of credit or cash or check sureties, we would move to these new percentages for public streets or right-of-way for sewer depth greater than or less than 12 feet and 25% where sewer is greater or equal to 12 feet. But if a developer does want to put forth a surety in the form of a bond, we would add 10% to that surety amount. Minimum would be maintained at $10,000, but we would go to 25 and 35% on those two categories just previously mentioned. So all of the other revisions, we're asking you to approve those as they were presented, with this just one exception in the form of surety bonds having a little bit higher coverage.
I have a question. I think we talked about at the same time, at the same meeting we were talking about this, we discussed the potential of wrapping water, sewer, landscaping into one single bond. And I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but since we're talking about it, have you thought about that?
We did, but the fact that they're on such different when they actually are implemented, when the warranty starts, the timing of them all to try to wrap them into one bond, it just isn't really, it's not reasonable.
Thank you.
I'll move for approval then.
Second.
Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Gore.
Thank you very much.
All right, we now have a property purchase for Cherry Lane Extension. Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As part of the 2040, Darren's really tall. As part of the 2040 Major Thoroughfare Plan, the city is planning on the extension of Cherry Lane from the existing Richard Siegel Soccer Park to Sulphur Springs Road, as well as the future expansion of Caroline Farms Drive from Thompson Lane to Cherry Lane. The subject property that we're asking the purchase of would have had significant impact during the right-of-way acquisition of both roadways and the possibility of proximity damages. The entire 14-acre property is being acquired and will allow for beneficial alignment and drainage of the roadway systems. Any remnants of the subject property could also be sold, helping to recover some of the purchase costs or be used in the expansion of the Siegel Soccer Park. An appraisal was completed, and the property, including the residence, was valued at $500,000. Staff recommends, after discussion with the owner, purchasing the property for $525,000, which is consistent with council previous purchase offers of the appraised value plus 5%. The funding for the purchase of the property will be split between the 2018 and 19 bond fund for both Cherry Lane Phase 2 and Caroline Farms, respectively. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
How many acres is it, Mr. Griffith? How much property is it?
It's about 14 acres and a pretty nice residence. And we think we'll be able to save the residence and sell it afterwards if needed.
Okay. All right, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Mr. Griffith, I'm going to pass on this just from Caroline. I don't have anything to do with it, but I will pass.
I understand.
All right, we'll move to the Northfield Boulevard Extension Phase 1 at Miscast Line relocation.
Yes, the Northfield Boulevard project is progressing. If you remember, this is the section between Garrison Drive and Thompson Lane. We've always known we've dealt with this gas line in the past. It's one of the main feeds for Atmos into Murfreesboro. Atmos has been working on getting their cost and construction cost and getting a realignment completed. They have now bid that project, and the construction estimate prepared by Atmos Energy is $370,680. This will allow completion of the Northfield project between Garrison and Thompson. It was outlined in the sale with the Vanderbilt University Medical Center. The primary funding source for this project is from that land sale. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any discussion?
No questions. I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Looks like we have several beer permits.
Mayor, we do. I'm going to go over some of them first. We've got an ownership change for a restaurant at 1453 Silo Hill Lane. That application is in order. They have completed everything necessary for us, except for the building codes inspections. Additionally, United Way had an application earlier. They have changed their event date from what was previously submitted. So all we're asking is to reconfirm that their date is okay. I have another one on here for an organization that has several events at the Buddhist Temple at 5214 Old Nashville Highway. I'm not certain if that's in the city limits.
I think it was, but
I have a different staff member doing these now, and you know, Gary? It's not. Okay, so I'm not going to ask for approval of those. All I'll be asking for is for the restaurant and United Way change of date.
Move for approval.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye, but I'm not sure that 1453 Silo Hill Lane's in the city either.
It is. Is it one of those hotels? I believe
Okay.
it's the Holiday Inn.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
All
While
right.
we're talking about that, just real quickly, did we decide about whether or not, can we get a special use or a beer permit or whatever to have some sort of a function out on the, whatever we call this?
Plaza.
The plaza, yeah. We talked about that at some point. I think Eddie brought it up.
That's
Is
new to
it-
me. I haven't
It's
researched.
been months ago. I remember we talked about trying to generate more activity out there or something. Is it able to, is there somebody able to rent that or use it?
We actually have some locations that are approved for that, so if it's not added, I'm sure we could amend that schedule. Nate may
Can we
know.
use the plaza? I mean, can an organization ask to use the plaza if there's alcohol served is what I need to know.
Yeah, Councilman, I think I need to go back and check. I know we changed the policy for renting that space. I'll go back and look if we included that when we took to commission, then came to council a couple months ago. But if not, it's something we can easily do.
As long as it's not city employees and you're in work hours.
All right.
All right, thank you, Nate.
If it's something you'd like for us to look at, we'll look at
I'd like
taking
to
it
know
to
the
a
answer.
commission.
I had someone ask me from an organization, so I'm just.
I'll let you know for sure, but
Okay.
it's a good idea. It falls in line with the same uses for the other facilities where we allow alcohol.
Okay.
And if not, we can amend that schedule. We have a specific schedule for city properties that it's allowed. I just don't know if it's on there. If not, we could amend it.
Okay.
All right, we need to reappoint Mr. Doug Young, or excuse me, Doug Cook. See Douglas, and that's the first thing I think about. Mr. Douglas Cook and Dr. Roger Heinrich to the Murfreesboro Cable and TV Commission.
So moved. Second.
Motion is second, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any statements?
No, sir.
Any other business? All right, seeing none, we'll stand adjourned.